Is it the Christian's duty to actually preserve the environment and control population? There's a point that's been made, and it keeps being made lately, even in religious circles. The key to the survival of humanity is to preserve the environment and control the population. This is an article by Dave Hunt way back in 1994, but it's still current and applicable. Underlying the environmental movement is the theory that mankind is the product of evolutionary forces inherent within the universe. The scientific humanists regard these forces as impersonal, while the classical pagan, or New Ager, views the world and cosmos as a living entity, a goddess known as Mother Nature or Gaia or Mother Earth. This is still current. Now we have global warming. We'll go into that at another time. The growing pagan spirituality, with its worship of creation instead of the creator, is ideal for joining science in all non-Christian religions and even some Christian religions. They try to join what is false science about the fact that the planet is going to self-destruct pretty soon. Carl Sagan told that Earth should be regarded as sacred to encourage treating it with care and respect, not because God made it, although that's in Scripture, that we're supposed to do that, be responsible, but because it, Gaia, made us. Sagan, who rejects the biblical God, says we should revere the sun and stars. This scientific neopantheism is called ecotheology. Another advocate, Professor Victor Ferkiss, says its basic premise is that the universe is God. Remember Mikhail Gorbachev, leader of Russia a while back. He's an atheist. He says, to bring nations together to simulate the new environmental consciousness, returning man to a sense of being a part of nature. To require man to act as if he's part of nature is an admission that he's not. Nature's creatures need no such urging. Gorbachev has said that conflict with nature is fundamental to our technologies. Yet conflict with nature is impossible to natural creatures. They just say stuff, and they're leading world countries, so radios, TV, cars, planes, computers, operas, and art are not natural, nor are ambulances, doctors, hospitals, and compassion, so-called, right? If evolutionists believe their theory, then they should shut down all medical facilities and let the weak die naturally. Medically prolonging lives allows such persons to pass on their defects to subsequent generations. If evolution is true, then we must stop trying to find a curse for AIDS, stop treating those with HIV virus and let them die. Since AIDS is largely a homosexual disease, it must be nature's way of wiping out those who practice what is undeniably unnatural sex, according to nature's survival of the fittest approach. Let me just fix this. The sooner those with deficiencies die, the better for our species. That's awful. People do think that. If stopping all assistance to the ill so that only the fittest survive sounds harsh, blame nature. That's her way. There's nothing more natural than disease, pain, death, and those calamities known as natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, lightning, drought, and famine, to name a few. Gaia, or Mother Nature, is anything but kind. The evolutionists attempt to have it both ways, denying a personal creator yet insisting upon morals and compassion which can't come from nature, betrays the lie. Animals have no concern to help their fellows, even in the face of death. If we were a natural product of evolution, then we would accept death as a natural process. After the lion has dragged down its victim, the herd pauses in its flight and grazes while the lion eats its prey nearby. In contrast, man mourns the death of his fellows and feels an inner anger against death itself. Man realizes that death is not the way things ought to be, but an enemy which has invaded our lives. Only Christ destroys death, against which science and religion have no real hope. If evolution were true, grab my tea here. Hang on a second, I'm grabbing my tea. Get perked up after my nap. If evolution were true, and Al Gore's tree hugging made sense, then whatever man did, from muggings to murder to war, would be a natural act. Police courts, prisons, and criminal accusations would have to be eliminated. Animals, the wind and sea, gravity, and lightning act neither morally nor immorally, but naturally. And the same would be true of man. If it is not wrong, nature has no morals, for a volcano to spew forth poisonous gases, then neither is it wrong for man-made factories or aerosols to do the same. Or crime. Man commits crime, that's natural. Nor can there be any complaint if Oregon loggers wipe out the spotted owl or whalers exterminate their prey. By destroying creatures standing in his way, man, as the ultimate predator, would only be fulfilling his evolutionary purpose as the fittest species which is able to survive at the expense of all others. Honest logic discredits the evolutionary theory behind much of the environmental movement. No impersonal natural force could design and produce a single cell, much less the brain. Only the God of the Bible could have brought moral man into existence. Thus, the solution to man's problems is not in living harmoniously with nature, as we are being told, but in being reconciled to the God who made him and in submission to his will. This old creation is under God's judgment and will not be rescued from it, but is held in store, reserved for destruction by fire. Everything will be destroyed, and God will make a new heavens and a new earth, and he'll make us over. I'm having difficulty myself. I've been a Christian since 17, but I'm now facing, at my old age, the fact that I must be part of this old creation and die. I'm really attached to this temporal life and have a purpose in my life. But God is not going to stop me from dying, but he'll take me home when it's time. Or maybe I'll live long enough to get to the rapture. I'm not sure that it's not around the corner in terms of a number of years. But that's another story, that's not in Scripture. Although we can count the number of years as they've transpired throughout the ages, 2,000 years from Adam and Eve to Abraham. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jewish age till 1st century, somewhere around 2,000 years, less the 7-year tribulation period. And then we have Jesus, though 2,000 years seems to be, but not specified, stipulated, but 2,000 years seems to be the period of time for the church age, at which time Christ will come, take home his own, children of God, born of God, and we'll have the 7-year tribulation period. When we get taken home, we get transformed into perfect beings, which we were first intended to be from the beginning of creation. But for the fall in the garden, of which we are feeling the results of, at which we are no better. So, everything will be destroyed and God will make a new heavens and a new earth. We must live for that eternal state. That's what I'm transforming myself in my own mentality to try to do today. Keep in mind eternity and warn mankind that only those saved by the redemptive work of Christ on the cross will inhabit his new perfect universe. Keep your eyes on eternity. Expound upon the gospel to others. Robert W. Lee states, history is replete with ludicrous lamentations about alleged overpopulation. Confucius and other Chinese thinkers worried about excessive population growth centuries before Christ. Plato and Aristotle fretted about it. In the Roman Empire, environmental fright peddlers proclaimed that population growth had worn out the earth. Even then. Writing in crowded Carthage in the 2nd century after Christ, the philosopher Tertullian wailed that what most frequently meets our view and the occasion's complaint is our teeming population, Our numbers are burdensome to the world, which can hardly support us, they think. In very deed, pestilence, and famine and wars and earthquakes have to be regarded as a remedy for nations, as the means of pruning the luxuriance of the human race. Wow. We're not overpopulated anywhere near that right now. Such unsubstantiated fright peddling has continued to haunt us in the 20th century. After 2 world wars and all these other uncountable wars and conflicts. In his 1948 book, Our Plundered Earth, or Planet, Fairfield Osborne predicted that the world could not feed more than 2 billion or so then living. Wow. I wonder if you can look back on what he wrote. In The Population Bomb, 1968, Stanford University biologist Paul Ehrlich predicted that hundreds of millions of persons would die of starvation worldwide and that the U.S. would have food rationing by the end of the 1970s. That's come and gone. In 1984, he predicted the United States will quite literally be dying of thirst. 1981, the Global 2000 report to the President, commissioned by Jimmy Carter, declared that the world food population production per capita would increase less than 15% between 1970 and 2000, while real food prices would double. None of those dire predictions, nor anything else to them, actually occurred, nor anything close to them. None of it actually occurred. Regarding the Global 2000 report, nationally syndicated environmental communist columnist Alston Chase wrote in 1989, rather than becoming more scarce, most agricultural products are increasingly abundant. Give it half a chance, it'll grow. Try to restrict it, and it won't grow. That's artificial restriction. An illustration of how governments create and perpetuate poverty can be found in the case of Ethiopia during the rule, in 1977-1991, of Marxist dictator Lieutenant Colonel Mengistu Haile Mariam. Oh, awful time. But we've had more in the past, more in the present, more in the future. In the middle 1980s, Americans were inundated with news stories portraying the horrors of famine that eventually claimed the lives of an estimated 1 million Ethiopians. Starving children with flies crawling on their faces helped to create an impression of overpopulation. But as news commentator Paul Harvey might say, here's the rest of the story. Traditionally, Ethiopian peasants had stored food in good years as a hedge against bad harvests. Left to their own auspices, they did that. But the Mengistu regime had outlawed the practice, branding it hoarding. It was also customary for peasants to invest money earned from surplus crops grown, we fix this, on their own farms to expand production. But Mengistu attacked that practice as capitalist accumulation and banned it. Occasionally, independent food traders would buy food in areas of the country where food was in surplus and transport it to areas where food was scarce. That free market solution to the distribution problem was besmirched as exploitation and also outlawed. That man murdered 1 million people, as syndicated columnist Jeffrey Hart observed at the time. The starvation in Ethiopia is man-made. The destruction of Ethiopian architecture was not a natural calamity, but the result of ideologically dictated government policy. Many densely populated countries with relatively free economies are thriving, and so are seldom mentioned by the overpopulation plotters, who prefer instead to focus on those relatively sparsely populated nations with oppressive governments which are plagued with problems that can be misleadingly attributed to fecundity. Ethiopia's population density, for instance, is a scant 117 per square mile, and its per capita gross domestic product, GDP, is a pitiful $121. By contrast, economically free market Singapore enjoys a per capita GDP of $13,900, despite a population density of 12,464 per square mile. These figures are way back then, now they're worse. Similarly, Taiwan, with a population density of nearly 5 times that of Red China,